Ach, Berlin. There were the love affairs with local men and the lesbians that would come knocking on our doors. And at night we would go to the Kit Kat Club and we would get home in the early hours, freezing cold in the dark. Berlin, it was a special time after the fall of the Berlin Wall and before the arrival of the BMWs. I miss you. Welcome to the Berlin ReImagined episode of Nomad, the World is My Beat. I'm journalist Liza Foreman and I'm taking you around the world with me in my series. Berlin has played a major role in my life. I first went there as a university student. I was looking to do a PhD, but I quickly fell into journalism and working for an American film trade magazine called Variety, which is considered to be the entertainment Bible and is read by the who's who of the entertainment industry to know what's happening. It's how I got my break in journalism. It's how I got to know Berlin back in the late 90s and learn the ropes as a reporter. Now, this was a fascinating moment in the history of the city. I mean, which moment isn't? But it was soon enough after the fall of the Berlin Wall that not so much had changed. But while I was there and living in the former east part of Berlin, the city underwent some rapid changes. I like to say it went from being black and white to Technicolor overnight. And by that, I mean that when I arrived, the former east part of Berlin pretty much looked like the bombs had just recently stopped dropping, actually, after the war. It was grey, it was run down, people had toilets on the landing, they heated using Kohleheizung, or in the winter it would drop to minus 25 degrees, and it would stay below zero for 6 months a year, which my tiny body at the time couldn't really handle, to be honest. Anyway, during that period, not only did I get to learn to be a journalist and get into the entertainment industry and travel all around Germany and start to travel mostly around Europe to other festivals and TV markets, but I did witness this transformation of the city, and it was that basically, I suppose, investors came in and they started redecorating, but on the outside as well as the inside, so you could really see what was going on. It was beautiful to watch. And so suddenly these old grey rundown buildings were painted, their balconies and facades were put back on, the apartments were modernised. That was good and bad. You had warmer, safer places to live, but rents went up. Boutiques came in, trendier cafes. Actually, at the time, people thought food in Berlin was pretty bad. Then it just continued. So I left Berlin in 2000 and I made my way through London to work in Los Angeles as a correspondent. So this episode really begins or is inspired by a trip I made this February to Berlin, where instead of covering the film festival, journalism is in crisis, and these people I was writing for just didn't have budgets at the last minute also. So I landed on my feet and I decided to set out to explore how Berlin has changed in the 25 years since I left.
This is a PowerPoint in Berlin because it's one of the most built-up places between the old West Berlin and East Berlin. This building over here you see on the background, that's the State Library, and that used to be right up against the wall. You used to go into that library in the cafe and look over the wall into East Berlin. Today it's Potsdamer Platz. That was built up in the early 90s. It was one of the very first developments where all the money went, commercial developments in East Berlin, and its function was to blend East Berlin and West Berlin. It was to create a point where the West blended into the East and the East blended into the West without even noticing.
One of the trends I uncovered while I was doing the round was that Berlin really leads the way in repurposing brilliant historical buildings and turning them into everything from hotels to multi-purpose swimming pool, restaurant. I got to stay in a lot of these places. The trip began at the Hotel Oderburger in Prenzlauer Berg. It was a former state baths. It was in disrepair for a long time. It was used, like many of these abandoned spaces, by the underground for a while, for events, for art exhibitions and so on. But it's now a hotel, and what's so interesting about it is the space and the redesign of what was basically a bathhouse for local residents. I went from there to Hotel Orania in Kreuzberg, which is the revival of a historic bar, music venue, hotel venue for artists, and they had a wonderful bar and buffet and jazz concerts going on downstairs. Other stop-offs included a former dairy, the Boller Dairy, which has become the Hotel Amiens on the banks of the River Spree, which itself has been hugely developed just along from the wonderful new Hauptbahnhof, the main train station. And the list goes on. Most interesting were a couple of reworked former state prisons. One is now a fetish restaurant and houses gay artists mostly and has been turned into a hotel. Another one is a hotel, living complex, restaurant, cafe near Savigny-Platz, and these places are just fantastic. They're just, the city has some great architects and they've done great things with the history of the place. And so, because I wasn't at the Berlinale, because I wasn't just sitting inside cinemas and talking to industry people, I really got to take a great look at the festival, at the city rather. And another thing I really enjoyed was that the Berlin Philharmonic, which is of course an absolute institution, has branched out and now runs a biannual Biennale. And this was brilliant. I got to go over to Sascha Waltz's Radial System modern dance theatre and see a collaboration between the company and the Berlin Philharmonic. I got to go to some concerts inside the Neue Kunsthalle and other venues around Berlin. So I loved it. I tapped back into the old world. I saw places like the Volksbühne that I used to go tango dancing in and was up the road from my house on Rosa Luxemburg. Platz still stands intact, that the Babylon Cinema doing films with live orchestras is still in business. I love the new Soho House in the former, I think it was the Hitler Jugend Group's headquarters or something like that. Some of my colleagues who have stayed on are not quite as impressed as the changes that have taken place. One has complained to me that because of stringent German regulations, a lot of the new builds are just hideously ugly and boring. Others complain that it's just become sort of a BMW hotspot, as in wealthier and wealthier individuals have moved in there. And of course, what was great about Berlin back in the day is that it was affordable to artists. It was always kind of poor. So that's changed. When we got there as international students in the 20s, we all had to learn German, and we did. But now I don't know why. It's like the foreigners just stick to themselves and they just speak English everywhere. That's a big change. I'm not sure if that's a good change. Berlin has a lot to offer. It's much quieter and much bigger than other cities I've lived in. You can still breathe, walk around in peace. There's a lot more space. Apartments are bigger. It's still more affordable. It's funkier. It's edgier. You don't have to wear makeup. You don't have to dress up looking like a bimbo. You can just be yourself. It's a wonderful place. And I wish I could live in 5 places at the same time, and I would still also live in Berlin. You have to understand the way I am, mein Herr. A tiger is a tiger, not a lamb, mein Herr. You couldn't turn the vinegar to jam, mein Herr. So I do what I do. When I'm through, then I'm through, and I'm through. Toodaloo. Bye, bye, mein lieber Herr. Farewell, mein lieber Herr. It was a fine affair, but now it's over. And though I used to care, I need the open air. You're better off without me, mein Herr.